Peyton is a small but flourishing town on the southern slopes of Mount Etna, at 239 meters above sea level and 19 kilometers from Catania. It is a well-populated town, 50,000 inhabitants, and an important agricultural and commercial center. Citrus fruits, olives, fruit and vegetables, canned food products. It has very ancient origins, documented as far back as the Neolithic period, and was built on the site of the Greek Hybla Major, mentioned by Thucydides, Diodorus and Livius, occupying the hill, location of the ancient center, and the plain beneath. Numerous archaeological relics brought to light testify its ancient origins. Pottery dating back to the middle of the Bronze Age, 2nd millennium BC, remains of bars and spars, and ancient wall structures that date back to the Greek Archaic, 7th-6th century BC, Hellenistic, 4th-3rd century BC, and Roman periods. The ruins of an aqueduct, the remains of a vast burial ground and well-made mosaic floors, 2nd-1st century BC, prove the importance of the town and how it flourished for many centuries. Further archaeological remains from the hill, which date back to the 4th century AD and the Byzantine era, prove the uninterrupted existence of the town until the 7th-8th century. Later, in the Saracen period, it became a flourishing agricultural settlement, noted in about the year 1000 by the arid geographer, Al-Muqaddavi. In any case, Peyton owes its re-establishment and development to the Normans, who built the castle on the Great Hill in 1072, when they were conquering Sicily, and turned the settlement into a prosperous feudal town. From 1092 it was probably a dowry possession of the Countess Agdalasia, who was the wife of the Grand Count Roger the Norman, and the Countess endowed it as a feud to her brother Enrico, Count of Policastro, of the Monferrato family of marquises, who had married Flandrina, the Grand Count's daughter. Count Enrico was the true patron of Peyton's development, keeping a splendid court there. He was a great feudal lord and turned the town into an immense domain that stretched from the slopes of Etna to Piazza Armerina, Caltanista, Butra and down to the southern coast of Sicily. One action was to encourage the settlement in the town of a large colony of Lombards, a generic term for northern Italians, and the construction of churches and monasteries, offering extensive benefits and protection. This policy was continued by his successors. By 1161 the fortunes of this powerful family had declined and for 150 years the town was dominated by a series of seigneuries, di Marsico, di Lucy, di Ocra, di Perige, and in this phase, in 1221 and 1223, the Emperor Frederick of Swabia sojourned in the castle of Peyton, Lancia, Bonifacio, Malta, di Ampurias, until the time that Damja were driven out and the throne of Sicily was taken by Frederick III of Aragon. Then the town and another 8 of the island's centres were included in the Camera Regionale, a grouping of towns, land and farms assigned by the sovereign as seignory and dowry privileges, 1303, to his wife Eleanor of Aragon. Peyton remained in this institutional condition until 1431. King Frederick died in 1337, at Peyton's Hospital of San Giovanni dei Gerasoli, during a journey to Catania, and Queen Eleanor lived here in one of her townhouses, alternating her stays with time in that country house of La Guardia, near Nicolasi, where she died in 1343. After her demise, Peyton and the surrounding county were absorbed into crown property, but in 1360 it was reattached by King Frederick IV of Aragon to the Camera Regionale assigned to Queen Costanza of Castile. On her death, Peyton was sold to Count of Tal Alagona, Grand Judge of the Kingdom of Sicily, in 1365, and he added it to his quite significant properties. When Alagona fell into disgrace and was stripped of all his belongings in 1386, the town returned to the crown and in 1402 was assigned by King Martin I of Aragon to the Camera Regionale for his wife, Queen Bianca of Navarre. In 1405 Queen Bianca came to Peyton and from the tower issued the Civic Consuetudini, a collection of regulations that disciplined life in the town. In 1431, the kingdom had pressing need of funds, so Peyton was sold off by King Alfonso of Aragon to Nicol Special, former viceroy of Sicily, and, reintegrated as crown property in 1446, it was sold again in 1456 to Guglielmo Raimondo Monchada, Count of Ardenne and Master Judge of the Kingdom of Sicily. This was the start of a lengthy feudal seigneury for this powerful family, one of Sicily's greatest and richest, who owned the town and its hinterland until feudalism was abolished, 19th century. Since then its history has been one long sequence of inheritance, sometimes shaken by popular uprising to seek independence as a township and legal proceedings to restore it as public property, never with any success. As a county, Peyton was a large, well-administered feudal territory. There were 5,400 inhabitants in 1565 when it was raised to the rank of principality. In the meantime, a tumultuous phase of town planning within the municipality was driving its growth out and down the slopes of the hill. In the half-century that followed, progressive demographic growth continued, on the plain at the foot of the hill. This development was deeply accentuated in the 1600s, with a gradual depopulation of the hill itself. Economically, the town relied on the countryside, a source of subsistence and wealth, rich in crops, water and mills. So it was an important civic reality, with growing constructions, population and economy, when in 1693 it was hit by a violent earthquake that brought most of eastern Sicily to its knees. Recovery and rebuilding were soon implemented, and in 1781 the Prince of Pescara was able to boast that the town was mainly located on the promontory slope, offering a lovely view, and the rest was extensive and laid out on the underlying plain. At that time the population was almost 10,000 inhabitants. However, the town's definitive topographical appearance emerged during the 1800s, as the result of the council's town planning schemes and private initiatives. In that century, an era of massive civil unrest and political and institutional transformation, the township was involved in the ferments that constituted the unification of Italy and later the flourishing of social pressure, in an intense picture of popular participation in the struggles for the emancipation of the working classes. In the early 20th century, Paton grew to 24,000 inhabitants. The fertility and vitality of its countryside were proverbial, and even in the industrial sector the town appeared as having a good and developing manufacturing status. It was a town of substantial agricultural economy, so at that time it was able to concede itself some refined installations of contemporary civil architecture, and introduce to its urban fabric several graceful stylistic episodes. Nor did this stand as an isolated incident of virtuoso modern architecture on the town's overall panorama, whose most important reality was characterized by illustrious buildings left by the Normans, by the 14th and later centuries, for the tragedy of World War II that razed this helpless town, generating immense destruction in society and in the patrimony of buildings, and earned it a gold medal for its enormous sacrifice. Grand Mutilata meant that the mid-20th century was to be rich in transformation and precious building installations, as well as town planning solutions, which could be considered stages of resounding progress. Paton was the birthplace of the geographer and cartographer G.B. Nicolazzi, 1610–1670, the physician and naturalist Vincenzo Casari, 1708–1767, of General Michel Carrascosa, 1774–1853, the jurisconsult Emanuele Belia, 1792–1860. Civitas Fertilissima, as the town was defined and the title it enjoyed in the past, until the 16th century was a center of silkworm farming and silk production. At the end of the 1700s significant crops of corn, wine, oil, linen, hemp, cotton were recorded. Paton was also a lively cultural center, however. In 1634 the Accademia della Fenice was founded, and in 1704 a theatre was opened. It was also an intensely spiritual place. Several convents were installed there, from the Norman era onwards, and in the mid-18th century there were 32 churches, various convents of every religious order and numerous lay confraternities. The layout of the town is characterized by two main roads that meet at the Barai center of Piazza Regina Margherita, called the Quattrocanti, following the classic system of the Cardinals and Decumanus. One is via Vittorio Emanuele, which leads from the Villa Monçada, the town park, at the eastern end of town, reaches down to Piazza Indipendenza, which acts as the town's salon, closed by the dramatic Baroque facade of the Mother Church of SS. Annunziata, and behind it stands the famous basalt cliff, the location of the ancient settlement. The other is via G.B. Nicolazzi, which rises through the town from south to north, as far as Lago Assisi. Another important artery is via Emanuele Belia, in the north of the town, with Piazza della Regione at its center. This square is the location of Palazzo della Procura, formerly the town hall, and is enhanced with an artistic fountain whose mosaic panels are inspired by the most significant episodes of civic history. The oldest part of the town, with its narrow, tortuous streets, is set against the hillside. The modern area, to the east, towards Catania, has a uniform checkerboard layout favored by the flat land of the plain. The hill is very interesting, with a large number of important works of architecture. The mighty castle, built by Roger the Norman in 1072 and modified in the 13th century, a great armory, a gallery with huge two-light windows, a panorama across the Cimitu Valley, decorated by a splendid Palatine chapel with exceptional early 13th century frescoes. The ancient Mother Church of Santa Maria dell'Alto, of the Norman period with substantial reconstruction in 1342, with its severe neoclassical facade and monumental staircase entrance, 1773. The church houses the extremely historic Black Madonna icon. The enormous, suggested ruins of the convent of San Francesco, 1346, in French Gothic style, with the annexed church that has recently been restored. The Church of Cristo al Monte, mid-16th century, with its impressive Baroque altar. The Church of Santa Maria del Grazie, 1611, whose interior is enhanced by delicate Rococo decorations and annexed monumental cemetery. The Santa Maria della Valle di Giuseppe d'Organzia Church, built by order of Countess Agdalesi in 1092, with a lovely Gothic portal dated 1300 and a wooden truss ceiling of 1500s. The solemn sanctuary of Maria SS della Consolazione, 1954, in vivid neo-Romanesque style. The minute church of San Giacomo, 16th century. At the foot of the hill we find the austere church of San Marco, about 1130, interesting detail of local Norman architecture, with a barbaric facade and traces of ancient frescoes inside. The picturesque Tor dei Falconieri, 14th century, with the next Itria church. The 17th century SS Annunziata Church, now Peyton's mother church, with its dramatic Baroque prospect, but completed in 1908, and 18th century convent mold dominated by a massive cupola. The great church dedicated to the patron saint, Barbara, 1583, with an elegant neoclassical interior. The solemn, compact church of San Domenico, 1562. The Renaissance Carmine Church, 1502, with a statue of the Madonna of the Chain of the Gagini School. The Church of San Margherita, 1750, an interesting example of minor Etna Baroque. Recent architectural additions, 1987, to include some noteworthy items of religious constructions, such as that in Lago Assisi, and the fascinating resonance offered by the dynamic mass of the Church of San Francesco all'Annunziata. Inside, the exquisite eloquence of a hall rich with unanticipated form and decoration. Beyond Lago Assisi, north of the Old Town, the local Christian Democrat group, led by Member of Parliament Nino Lombardo, implemented a modern satellite belt, the Quartiere Paradise Zone, result of an advanced urban planning culture, crossed by wide roads, valorized by functional green installations, as well as rational residential buildings and the elegant town hall, the original Spirito Santo Church and various service buildings.